would you please check your ideas and opinions at the door? All your philosophical and religious views, all your logic, because I say check it at the door advisedly because you can pick it up again when you go out if you feel unsafe without it. I'm not trying to argue you out of your opinions and views. I'm merely suggesting that for the sake of an experiment, you temporarily suspend them.
Hello and welcome to the Philosophical Minds podcast, an exploration of all things philosophical, alchemical, and esoteric, from the psycho-spiritual to the material-chemical nature of the all. Join me and my guests as we inquire into the liminality of mind and matter, and tend to the fertile soils of awareness and perception while facilitating an expanded consciousness from the individual to the collective. If you enjoy the show and find it of value, consider supporting and becoming a patron via the Patreon at patreon.com/philosophicalminds. A small contribution makes a big difference and definitely makes it easier for me to continue the show, although I will always do my best to keep it flowing regardless. Thank you all, and let's get into it.
Go, brother.
All right. This evening, I am joined with someone who has expanded my knowledge and understanding tremendously in many areas, and he's become a good friend as well. Golden Dawn Temple Chief, Freemason, Rosicrucian, Martinist, and host of the Spectacular Arcanum podcast, Ike Baker. I think this is, what is this? Round 4 or 5 we're on right now, something like that.
Well, how are we counting it? Your podcast or like a combination of
Yeah,
both?
that's what I was wondering. I think it might be 5 with ours both included. I'm thinking, if I have that right.
So.
Either way, pretty awesome.
I
I just listened to your interview with professor of religious studies and theology, Gregory Shaw, today, and that was awesome. That dude is super rad, and that I think those kind of conversations are pretty giant and important these days because what a bridge that is. For some of the more academic minded individuals kind of on his end, kind of being able to bridge that between a practitioner such as yourself in these areas of interest, like you guys were, getting into Iamblican theurgy and Neoplatonism. And yeah, so if anybody is interested in any of those subject matters, I would highly recommend you guys go and check that episode out, the most recent on your podcast, because that was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. He's a legend, man. He's a legend. And the funny thing is, I'm not speaking with him kind of off camera. I'm not 100% certain he's aware how influential he has been, his work particularly regarding theurgy in the soul. That was released in 1995, originally published, and he has steadily released these amazing free essays that he's put together, academic essays on academia.org or .edu, I forget, but if you have a profile there, I mean, all his stuff is for free, and they're in no short supply. But he has been tremendously influential to not only scholars, but to practitioners and people who are now sort of bridging both worlds. The great thing is that a lot of those people do so somewhat clandestinely, or at least quietly, and that's not really my style. So I like to just go in and kind of confront people with like, hey, you a magician? You do magic? It's pretty cool. I was delighted to hear that he actually felt a pull away from the academic mindset, and he's always been of this kind of mystical ilk. And for me, that is what enables somebody to have such deep, profound insight, and eventually become as influential as he has. Not because he has any book learning. Most people just scratch their heads and they're like, how the hell does he understand this stuff? Well, because it's not just here,
Yes. Yeah, and yeah, he did say something in that interview. I think he said, yeah, it's my cover or something along those lines. I thought that was funny. But yeah, so one of the subjects we're going to explore is the celestial hierarchical nature of reality as well as the unconscious structure of mind and magic. So to start off, kind of to open this up, maybe this gets into the hierarchy of being itself. I don't know. I'm hoping it'll open up some understanding, at least into. I'm going to try to ask this question in a couple different ways and try to get to what I'm trying to get to with my available language, and then add some context and like contemplative considerations for the listeners to absorb. And so this will kind of be like a long-winded thing, but I think it's necessary. So where do subconscious forces or aspects of being contained within one's personal mind end, and external entities begin, or external consciousnesses begin? It's easy to make a distinction in this earthly physical realm of separate bodies that we can all relate to, like where, we see our friends and our family and the people that we interact with day to day and recognize them as individuals in and of themselves. Like, I'm here, here's my body, this person's over there. Like, I can recognize that distance and that differentiation between myself and them as self, and so on. But when it comes to spirituality in the spiritual world, it gets a little bit more complicated to comprehend, I think, from, say, beings that we meet in dreams, like beings in DMT or other entheogenic induced experiences, angels, demons, or our daemons themselves. Like, what are the designating criteria that would distinguish, say, an archetypal manifestation of one's individual subconscious, like maybe arising in a dream, perhaps, versus an actual external soul entity, angelic encounter, something along these lines? Because, like, on a level, I subscribe to the understanding that to know thyself is to know that thyself is in and of the all, and all is essentially oneness, individuated in many. But from the vantage point of our current incarnation, our state in this human form, in this realm called Earth, when it comes to things like goetic demons, or the greater and lesser keys of Solomon, the Kabbalistic Sephirot, and the Quiffle, I always don't know how to pronounce that other name, the other side of the Kabbalah. Yes. And in terms of how are we to relate to them properly? But yeah, like what aspects of these things are in regards to our subconscious individual self or psychological archetypes, and what of them are quote unquote separate individual entities with their own autonomous nature and motivations?
Okay, so that is a gigantic question. Not because of the way that it's structured, but because of everything that it implies. And it gets to the heart, the core of something that I keep having to come back to, not just out in like public discourse and things like that, but in my own life and my own practice, my own sphere of sensation, to distinguish the magical worldview and to consistently test the magical worldview against my subjective experience and against what I understand or can conceptualize about objective reality. Now, very importantly, giving them both their own domains of truth, right? Their own domains of authority. One of the, I guess, stumbling blocks, really, it's a wall. It's a fucking wall that most of us just hit at a certain point, where I can't or I won't go further, because my understanding either can't or won't penetrate into this no man's land from my perspective on the, let's say, outside. And one of the ways that can be resolved, really the only way that you can go further, is to transcend dualistic thinking. Now, here's the thing. Talk about non-duality and you get a lot of very, very half-baked conceptions of everything, right? If you've got a lot of personally, I see a tremendous amount of mental and emotional immaturity within the non-dualist kind of movement, these community dialogues. It's basically an attenuated form of solipsism, really, that ends up posing as enlightenment. At the end of the day, you have to acknowledge duality, because whether you like it or not, that is the material basis for our lived experience as physical, concrete beings in, let's say, Malkuth of Asaya. But there's an interesting, and I'll get to the point, I promise. But a lot of this is worldview. 100% it's worldview. You've got to get yourself in the right place to begin to comprehend these things. And what you have to do is you have to, as Master Yoda has put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. A lot of people talk about kind of becoming disillusioned and waking up. Well, this is technically the awakening process, which is to acknowledge, everything that is the contradiction, the polarity, the duality, the ultimate unity, which is not, it's not able to be experienced in wake-a-day consciousness. In your understanding, your ego will only feel, let's say, for an analogy, will only feel the heat from the peripheries of that experience. Okay, where that is experiential, your ego cannot go. And I think a lot of us have to stop pretending that we've been there. But ultimately, you have to transcend duality in order to get to this stuff. And how do you do that? Well, a lot of people say, I'm going to use an analogy, right? You've got this end of the spectrum and this end of the spectrum. And a lot of people say, well, I'm going to transcend the duality here, right? And I'm going to exist somewhere in the acknowledgement of the gray matter and try and get myself in between these 2 points, as balanced as I can, a dynamic equilibrium. Well, your perspective from that vantage point will continually be skewed because you are still on that, one-dimensional planar model. You're just oscillating, albeit slightly, you're oscillating between light and dark, black, white, good, evil, happy, sad. The only way to really gain the vantage point where you can begin to change your mind and really awaken to the magical worldview, which, it's not something you select, it's something you realize. It's not a way that you choose to look at the world so much as it is a way that the world really reveals itself. And that you have a bigger part to play. Your consciousness is way bigger than you had assumed. But the only way to do that is to stop oscillating, right? You've got these 2 polar points. You have to get off of this, A-B axis and transcend it and achieve the triangle, right? That's what Pythagoras always used to say. And you have to really get out of the push-pull of duality. And that doesn't necessarily mean transcendence and stopping striving, stopping being a person, stopping using your persona to interact. It's just having an acknowledgement that both exist and that I can live with both of those things because I am the mediator. My consciousness is the mediator of those things. And that's not to say that I am the locus of, black or white, right or wrong. I don't get to establish those things. Those things are objective truths in their domain, right? But to rise above them and accept them at the same time, accept the paradox, then you can begin to move forward. That is ultimate transcendence. And it's a species of aporia. It's a species of emptying. It's basically, I think, what the point was when Plato wrote that Socrates said that he only knew that he knew nothing. He came across like a know-it-all, but at the end of the day, it was this passion that he had, I think, to strip people of being stuck in this oscillation between polarities and planting a flag in certain points. I think it was his passion to rip people out of that circuit and attempt to send them on their way to another vantage point. So you have to break out of this. We've been conditioned. We have literally been brainwashed. There is no conspiracy theory about it. Absolutely. Human beings are ultimately conditionable things, if we're anything, because of how communal we are, and how aware we are, right? It's like an animal can only understand its end when its life is threatened. It's a very instinctual thing, but we can think about death anytime. And that forces us into as we were talking about on the last conversation we had, forces us into reacting, and in typically very predictable ways, right? There's that whole Hegelian dialectic. But anyway, without digressing too far, we suffer as a modern iteration of humanity from what I like to conceptualize as a Cartesian disassociation. We cannot view the world the way it is. Postmodernism has attempted, you can't destroy truth. There's no way you can destroy truth. Everything that exists rests on the foundation of truth, which can be defined as that which is. Okay? What you can do is obscure people's ability to comprehend it. You can obscure our ability to detect truth, to see it. And one of the ways that we do this is by this Cartesian, hyper-analytical way of being in the world, which is to say that you're not actually in the world, you're just constantly analyzing it. So we're kind of stuck there, and we've got to get through that as a group of people, as a species right now, in large part. But ultimately, to move forward and address what you're talking about this hierarchy, the reason why it's so important is because you have to experience those worlds, and those worlds very rarely come to us. We typically have to make a concerted effort to travel there, to see there, to open ourselves to those realities. And again, in order to do that, you have to achieve this state of, I don't know. I'm just here. I'm aware. My mind is open, relatively alert, but receptive. And you have to train yourself to be able to achieve that state for you, right? Because there are ways to get there, but what works for everybody is going to be different to a greater or lesser extent. I have found that attitude is a real determinative key. It really determines the outcome of your endeavor. Attitude, and which is set by intention. I think that one of the occult secrets is humility. I think that is absolutely an occult secret. You can always tell the difference between a theurgist and a sorcerer, because one is constantly talking about power. The desire to have power, when in reality, the theurgist, maybe they start down the path of magic because they want to have power that they don't currently possess to remold their lives or what have you. But at the end of the day, if you keep going down that path, you realize that all this power, you don't really want it. And that's when it comes, when you don't want it anymore, because ultimately relinquishment to the highest, the understanding, the realization that I am only here to be a vessel for the part of me that is closest to the absolute, and or the aspect of my spiritual architecture which is closest to the absolute, because it ain't me, it ain't Ike. Okay. um
Yeah.
that said, once you open yourself up to these potential states of receptivity, a lot of times dreams are great. Dreams are great, but they're not always the most surefire way to be able to say, yes, that was an intelligence, that was an angel. So really what you have is you have a couple of different techniques. One of them is lucid dreaming. The other technique is, I would say, true scrying, true pathworking, true astral projection. And in both cases, what you are doing, right, is marrying the opposites. You're taking your waking consciousness and you're taking the subconscious underlying reality that informs things like dreams, and you're marrying them. And in one case, really what's interesting in dream is like you're taking, like when you lucid dream, it's like taking your conscious mind and inserting it into the subconscious as almost like this. You're creating this, you're hollowing out this avatar in that world for your conscious mind to enter into and explore. That is very difficult to sustain. Some people have great luck with it. Some people are very skilled at it. I've always been hit or miss with me. I am much more the type of person where I receive communications and things like that I sit down, I focus, I create the space, and I go into that world.
Yeah. And you actually, sorry, go ahead.
No, I want to just bookmark that so I remember to pick up there, but go ahead.
Okay. I was going to mention that you had actually helped me differentiate, and you made this clear for me, that the difference between astral projection and astral travel, because that was something I had always been confused about. And anytime I had heard people discussing or bringing up astral projection, in my mind, I was thinking astral travel. And you kind of pointed out, in terms of astral travel, that's where you're actually physically traveling out of your body. Astral projection is more of a different thing. So I thought that's one point maybe I thought would be cool for you to touch on a little bit. And then,
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
So astral travel is in a lot of senses, astral travel is more like the cultivation of the body of light. Some people kind of call it like the Merkaba or stuff like that. It's essentially, the ancient Egyptians had this kind of like weird technique that they sort of alluded to. There's nothing like too concrete because all that stuff is kind of way up for interpretation. But the interesting thing is that they subdivided the parts of the soul into what at first we thought was like 3 or 4, and then later found out to be at least 9. But the thing that really concerns us is the body, right? The spirit and the soul, which is the spirit was the Ka, the etheric double. The soul was the Ba, and the Ka and the Ba, they survived physical death, and the Ba, the soul, the psyche, could travel between realms, and it was typically symbolized in a hieroglyphic form by a human head, the pharaoh's head, whoever's head, on the body of a bird, and traveling, hovering just above the body after death, things like this. And the Ba would sometimes use the Ka to kind of move around in the physical world and travel and things like that. And actually, that was one of the principal rights of pharaonic Egypt was the survival of both the Ba and the Ka after death, to the point where they had the Ka statue, right, which was thought to be the double of the the deceased pharaoh or whomever, they would try and ensoul it in a likeness of the pharaoh or a likeness of just the Ka. There was this whole cult of the royal Ka in a cult of the royal spirit, which I guess we would kind of, to use the theosophical or modern kind of quantum spirituality terms, you'd say that was the etheric double, and the soul being more the psychic constituents of awareness. And so that's really what's happening in astral projection and things like that, and like scrying. You're projecting your consciousness to an area. It's more like remote viewing, but sometimes that can be so strong, or in actual practiced sort of ways, you create a simulacrum of yourself or whatever it is you want to appear like in front of you, and it is connected to you, and you sort of breathe life into it, and you have to fight it, because after a while it kind of wants to do its own thing, and you have to train it so that it doesn't act out of accordance with your will, so things don't get dicey, and then eventually you just begin to transfer your consciousness to that thing, and you can move around. So it's kind of the marriage of the Ba and the Ka, which is, that to me is more astral travel. Some people use these terms synonymously. All that stuff gets really garbled and jumbled by theosophical and post-theosophical, particularly the New Age vernacular. I mean, we don't even have a clear delineation between spirit and soul the way the ancient Greeks did, Right. So it's some of it's backwards, some of it's inverted. It's kind of there's catch-alls and things like that. Yeah. But essentially, when you train yourself to go into these mystical states, one of the things that's typically missing is some kind of protection. And that's what you're going to learn normally from magical orders. They're going to teach you basic ways to not go off the deep end with prolonged usage, and to sort of, once you begin to utilize that hierarchy, that individual hierarchy of spiritual bodies, it's like you don't have precision with toggling. So it all kind of activates. And so that will attract certain things and certain experiences that you want to insulate yourself from as much as possible, just because you're right. If you're open and you're aware and you're trying these things for the first time, or even if you've been doing this for 20 years and you still haven't really been able to link up your conscious waking state with that subconscious state, or the aspects of your spiritual organism or energetic organism which are more passive and need to be linked up to the conscious faculty, there's going to be some risks. There's going to be some risks that you can absolutely come apart, and we see it a lot, because after all, what we're dealing with here is just the broadest possible spectrum of consciousness. Yeah. That's all magic is. Magic, no matter whether it's the magic of evocation, whether it's the vibration of divine names, whether it's like just purely mental magic, chaos magic, we all agree the human consciousness is what either says the names or gives the command or does the binding or comes in the name of Christ, or it's us, it's our consciousness, and we're interacting with other forms of consciousness, and it's this massive spectrum. We're literally swimming in different types of consciousness, and again, you have to be able to really define that term, because it has a very limited term right now. I say consciousness, you think of the consciousness that you or I possess, but everything is conscious to one degree or another. It's interaction, right? And that's really the whole secret of the magical worldview, is that, like you were saying before, everything is one because everything comes from one. And so hierarchy, to the ancient Neoplatonists, to the ancient Gnostics, hierarchy was divine, right? Because hierarchy implies order, and it is self evident that the universe is ordered. Otherwise, nothing could exist. So this whole idea of just particles kind of randomly congealing together, forming these complex relationships, permutative relationships, it violates the first principle of chaos. If there isn't some kind of underlying intelligence that informs these interactions, that makes them behave in a certain way, whether it's magnetism, attraction, repulsion, something has to, there's some substratum. There's something that has to be there in order for these things not to just dissipate to the four directions into the abyss and have no reactions. And so, you know, that orderly fact of the universe, it basically speaks to this divine hierarchy. Whatever created us, whatever maintains, sustains us, its principal MO, modus operandi, is organization, right? Organization through polarity. And in order to experience that, you have to open yourself up to these other states. And you could do things like meditation, visualization. Meditation is great because you're learning to basically shut off the discursive mind. And then you can use different types. I'm not going to go into that's a whole other episode. And then you could, you know, you go into visualization. You have to develop the imaginal faculty. Not everybody has it. Thank God I was blessed with it. But some people have to really develop that sense of being able to picture things in their mind's eye. And so this is what happens. I can tell you from my experience. First of all, you have to be unwilling to exteriorize the locus of what decides what I consider to be real. Is it this a priori assumption that's been forced into me? Is it this kind of, you know, peer pressure to not seem crazy, to kind of go with the flow, believe am I scared of what kind of doors I'm going to be opening, how little I will truly understand of the world we live in? So once you have done away with the exteriorization of this locus of authority for reality, you then go in with, and you're able to experience the subjective world, the inner worlds. And you know, according to the idea or the philosophy of the macrocosm and the microcosm, if it's out there, it's in here. And so whatever power, whatever entity has its objective existence also has a subjective component within me. And it's typically by awakening the subjective component within my own psyche, sphere of sensation, that I am then able to call forth the corresponding objective entity. And it doesn't always come. And it's certainly, I mean, unless you're super gifted or you have beginner's luck, it's not going to come on the first try. Probably won't even come in the first year. And what happens is, particularly in the Golden Dawn Kabbalistic magic, you're in the right mental space, receptive, open to experience, not going to gaslight yourself into doubting what you're about to experience, what you're doing. Belief is there. You're focused. You're honed. You've got your protections up. You've got your correspondences. So you're not just going willy-nilly, right? Everything in the Golden Dawn particularly is mapped out on that tree of life. I have paths. I have Sephiroth. I know the correspondences. I use it as a basic underlying framework for the astral work I am about to do. So I use my techniques. I enter into the astral using my framework. Now, here's the big thing. Magic is different from mysticism primarily in one way. We are active. We don't open up to whatever's there, right? Because we're at a disadvantage. There's a veil. I don't know if what's behind that veil is presenting its true form, if it's delusion, if it's paranoia, or if it's a malevolent exterior entity. So I have to be very curated with the astral environment. And so it's an experiment. It's like walking out your door and only focusing on this particular thing. This one rose bush is the only thing I'm going to interact with today. And you come back, you write down your record. Then you get the lay of the astral landscape, and then you begin to call in entities by the appropriate names, correspondences.
Yeah.
And the first couple of times, likely they're going to manifest to you in some way that is pulling from the junk draw of your subconscious. Big Bird will show up in the middle of a a path of calf work. Yeah. What are you doing here, man? It's nice to see you, but and you've got to get through those things, focus, hone your sense of control, your discipline, and relax into the moment. And you create a simulacrum using correspondences of something that you want to engage with.
Yeah.
And this is the really, really tricky thing. This is when at least for me, at first you are imagining this. It's you. It's you that's creating this. I'm doing this with my mind, the simulacrum of this angel, this Yetziratic image, this talismanic image. And then it starts taking on a life of its own. And it's one of the most jarring experiences that I've ever had, was the first time. And it's still a little freaky every time it happens, but was the first time I realized I am not thinking this. I have nothing to do. I have created a space for this disembodied intelligence, this essential power, to enter into a carefully crafted, well-corresponded image, so that I know it's as close to what I want to call in as it can possibly be at this state. And then I've done everything that I can. And tells you on what you learn about reality. Is it prophetic? Is it, what is it? Is it tutelary? What kind of power is it? What did everything it say? Did anything change? Did any of the colors change in a way that weren't really matching up with whether it's Venusian or Martial or what have you, whatever kind of planetary energies are associated with whatever you're trying to call in. But the main thing is to it's a discipline, right? It's not simple. And that's one of the sad things, is that people go in and they just open up, and they have no real objective way of knowing whether or not, at least to the best of their ability, having vetted it to the best of your ability, they have no real way of knowing if it was just them kidding themselves, if it's just them telling themselves what they want to hear. And that's the interesting thing. I mean, 9 times out of 10, when I've had these interactions, they've been startling, jarring, surprising, not what I expected. There's not a whole lot of fuzziness. There's not this, it's like kind of, sometimes it can be a little distant, the relationship, but you write down everything that happens in your book, and if a couple days later, hindsight is 2020, you might just blow your mind. And again, that is the way you test it, because we're not talking about the realm of science, right, where I can boil this down to, this is the astral particle. Again, that's what they tried to do in the Theosophical Society, and it just it discredit everything that you do from now on, because you sound like an idiot. When they have to have their own realms of authority, and there's the objective and the subjective, and how they interact with each other through you, right? The meeting point of those two worlds is, you have to make up your mind. That's the whole thing, man. Faith is the first lesson in yourself and in the beyond.
Yeah. Wow, what a beautiful summation. And on the astral travel note, I wonder about that in terms of the cultivation aspect that you brought up, because what originally tipped me off to the whole exploration was a spontaneous out of body experience that I had. And I think essentially astral travel, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's basically an out of body experience, but in a controlled manner. Um, and I think that you did mention the idea of uh, doing its own thing. And I don't know if this is in regards to that, but the actual one successful astral travel experience that I did have was along those lines of being transported somewhere that was not within my intention. Um, it was just doing its own thing, like you're saying. So I wonder if that's related. But yeah, I wanted to ask you about that in terms of cultivating. I think you were saying like cultivating that light or something along those lines. And for instances where people do have these spontaneous experiences of, out of body experiences or astral travel experiences or whatever, what do you make of that, and how would you describe what's going on there?
Yeah. Well, again, right, people use these terms interchangeably. For me, right, astral projection is much more me projecting my consciousness, a kind of remote viewing, a kind of scrying. I am mentally entering into the landscape of on the astral imaginal level, which is it's a real place. It's not just fantasy, haha, la la land. It's an actual power to it, and we view it Kabbalistically in Yesod and the path of Tao, the underworld, which is, its gate. We view that as the blueprint of reality. So when you're working in the astral, you're working on the blueprint of the material to some degree. It's kind of like last stop before Malkuth,
Hmm.
So for me, astral projection is more when I project my consciousness into these things, into certain locales, places in the astral. Astral travel for me is more, and it's, some people consider it differently. They just use, the same terms, just vice versa. Astral travel for me is the cultivation of that body of light, the projection of my consciousness into it, and then actually traveling in places where you have a lot of accounts of like the etheric body becoming dissociated from the physical body. You have these Indian siddhis, right? The magicians of the East, really, of the yogic, the Vedic tradition, the siddhas, and the siddhis were the powers that they had, the magical powers. They'd sit there in an almost like catatonic state, very, very low, barely detectable cardiorespiratory activity and things like this. Their body's cold to the touch, and then they kind of snap out of it. It was traditionally considered a very tenuous state. And I think a lot of people now are like, it's an exaggeration. To which I say, you're probably just not fucking doing it. Like
Mhm.
you might pat yourself on the back. Wow, what a great astral travel I had. But it's like, in all likelihood, you were farting into a meditation cushion for an hour. Like it has nothing to do, and then you'll just get online and just tell everybody about what a wild ride you had and like what the new dispensation is. But there's no discipline, and there's no reverence or respect for having to cross-reference my experience with the tradition of others,
Mm.
right? Especially people who weren't dulled down by this shit
Yeah.
and computers, TV, and movies, and ambition, and 8 or 9 different things you got to get done in a day. These people had the ability to concentrate more easily than we do. So when I will look back and cross-reference my results with the greats, not whoever is wrote a book about their angel guides in the 1980s, and I'm supposed to be taking my notes from that. But anyway, you know, it's a very interesting interplay. I mean, that's the way that I do it. I don't really do astral travel often because I have, like, what's the point? I don't have anything I'm going to, I'm not going to go check up on somebody. A couple of things I've done as experimentations where I'll like attempt, and this was in the early days, right? I would attempt to appear in somebody's dream and then find out if it had happened. And it's so funny because there was only one person I was able to consistently do it to.
Yeah.
One person, nobody else had anything. I just failed to the point where I was just like, this shit don't work, or I'm not doing it right.
Yeah.
But there was this one dude, this one guy I'd been friends with for years. And, I'd have like these week-long sessions where I'd be trying to appear to different people and be like, God damn, you're in my dreams again. You're in my dreams again, man. No homo, but
that's hilarious.
So, I mean, what do you want? I was like,
yeah,
it's like
dreaming
15.
Yeah, and lucid dreaming's a blast. I've been like having some kind of hilarious experiences practicing with lucid dreaming lately, with like people duplicating in my dreams, or I've had one where I was telling people, I was like, hey, we're dreaming, like we can do whatever we want, and then like people will just like freeze and then just disappear. Just like odd, kind of funny experiences and like lucid dreaming and stuff like that. But
I have a lot of shadow, to borrow a Jungian term, which is very cliche, but there was a lot more in unkempt darkness. And so what would happen is I would get into a lucid dreaming state. And one of the things I tell people to do, which, I mean, I had months where I was doing this stuff. And I just it doesn't happen spontaneously. Like, I have to sit there and try, and by the end of like the 3-week-long process, I am so thoroughly exhausted. It's like I never want to dream again. So, but what I would do, a really cool technique for if you want to understand something, a symbolic image, a recurring symbolic image, is to go lucid and ask it what, don't ask it what it is, but ask it what it wants. That's because that will tell you more about the underlying quality. You know what I'm saying? It's like you go in, you have constantly having these dreams about snakes, and you say, what are you? Who are you? Like, I'm a snake. It's like, well, what do you want? Then it kind of you are allowing it safe space, or at least you're participating in the rule of the dream. It's like, we're not going to say anything out loud, right? Because we're dreaming. We have to maintain the illusion of this reality. So I'm going to ask you, what is it that you want? And I made the mistake of busting in and just being like, oh my God, I'm lucid. I'm finally lucid. Who are you? What are you doing here? And I'd get into these crazy fights where like these dream characters would like run from me and just try and beat me up and stuff, be like rolling down a mountainside with them. So I had, and you learn things about yourself, and occasionally you've gone somewhere because it's you have that realization where I'm like, I am interacting with something that is not a product of my own psyche. And I know that in dreams, that's the way it always seems. But when you are lucid, it's the same as in any kind of conscious, scrying effort or astral projection or any kind of astral work where you're engaged consciously and awake. You just, because there's something that's looking through their eyes into you, and there's this energetic exchange, this interplay. It's like, and you get glimpses of it in life. And to me, I remember I laughed for like 10 minutes just randomly in the shower one day because I had this realization that like, and now of course it's like a cliche to be woke, but I realized that at some point, probably about 4 or 5 years into my spiritual trajectory, really doing the work of an esoteric order, of an initiate, and I realized like this whole thing is about becoming awake in the dream of life.
Yeah.
It's like becoming lucid in a lucid dream, except you're here, and people want to think it's about becoming aware, but it's not the same thing. It's not awareness of, political structures. It's not awareness of underhandedness. It's like, it's literally to realize you are a dream character in the mind of God, and that when you go lucid, a part of God wakes up, and that's the work, of ultimate reintegration, human spirituality, quote unquote enlightenment. We, at some point, like, we all have to have that experience, and it's an alchemical thing. Nature will do that. Eons, lifetimes, ages, it will happen. But the initiatic current is more like that alchemical catalyst, where like, we're going to attempt to speed this up. We're going to expedite karma now, and help nature kind of hurry up, because this is painful. So
yeah, there was one thing I wanted to go back to, a term that you mentioned that maybe people aren't familiar with, that if you could just describe it, solipsism. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what that is.
Sure. It's a trap that I fell into. That is the natural, logical, quote unquote, conclusion of postmodernism. It's either one or the other, nihilism or solipsism. And I think solipsism is a little bit more of a, quote unquote, philosophical way of looking at it. But solipsism is essentially the belief that I cannot prove that anything or anyone outside of myself actually exists. It is the total and utter rejection of any kind of objectivity, and it is the placement of the soul mediation of reality, resting on it's just a very self-centered way of being in the world, and it's like, and it's paranoid. It's like this, it's kind of like this philosophical pathology. There is absolutely objective right and wrong. There is day when you go some places and night when you go others. Yes, they're both part of one circuit, but you can't deny, the objectivity of the fact that, like, you are having a subjective experience of this thing, this archetype that is occurring in the material, and so are tons of other people. And so solipsism basically says, like, I might as well be in a fucking coma dream. I have no idea that any of this is real. And I think that the people that I've seen, with myself included, having briefly come to that conclusion and kind of like tried it on, for a couple of teenage years, it does horrible things. You become more comfortable with being capable of very bad things, when that is your underlying sort of, that's what's informing you philosophically.
Yeah Is it like the thing, like, where you're thinking along the lines of everybody else that you're interacting with is just an aspect of yourself, and maybe you can fall into like these lines of thinking where, oh, I'll just like treat this person badly or get rid of them or discount or discard them because they're just an aspect of me that I want to get rid of, or something like that? Or is that related? Or
well, I mean, I'm not so certain what the actual, like, if I needed like a DSM classification for solipsism, somebody's solipsistically afflicted, but I think that you see solipsism actually kind of very, very, it's pervasive in the New Age kind of spiritual or spirituality milieu, in that you have this kind of transcendental line of thinking that says like, yeah, well, we all are one and you are me. And it's like, yeah, but that's some I am the walrus bullshit. You know, it's in reality, like, it's absurd. It's insane to say that you and I are the same person. That we do not occupy the same space. We don't have the same thoughts. It's not, it denies the other half of the equation.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if solipsism is I would assume absolutely that some people would go that route with it, exactly what you said, but I don't know if that's like technically what you classify as solipsism.
Yeah, for sure. I think it could lead to that kind of thing though. But
Yeah, but you see that shit in like supposedly, you know, stuff that people are doing and calling it enlightenment, when in reality, like, we're all different. We're all very different. We should celebrate our differences instead of trying to homogenize each other. Okay. And because everything that we enjoy, whether it's music or whether it's literature, is a product of fucking diversity in culture. That's what creates, right? I mean, that's evolution. We want the most diversity, variety, makes us stronger. And then you have this kind of other tack, which again came in through the New Age, which is like, no, we are all one. Not on this level. Not on this level. You know, right. you're kind of interpolating that meaning and applying it wherever you want without having knowledge of what it actually is trying to say about the reality of existence. But it's like it's just stubborn. It's willfulness. It's childlike. It's like, no, it's like your parents, like, it's bedtime, and just no, it's not. You know, it's just that on like this supposedly enlightened level.
That's funny. Could you speak a little bit to the Qwithaloth? I've steered away from it because I've had this idea of it being associated with like dark magic, but I recently heard this perspective of it kind of in regard to being along the lines of like the subconscious worlds and that kind of regard. Would you agree with that, or how would you describe the nature of that and everything?
Well, here's the thing. Again, people want to psychologize magic because they don't trust themselves to go out there and experience this stuff without gaslighting themselves into thinking like it's all a hallucination. It's very convenient to box things that scare us into this, like, no, it's all me. I'm doing it. You know, when that is not the case. And here's why that's dangerous. Because if you operate under that assumption in magic, you are liable to go fucking crazy. Can you imagine if like somebody put a walkie-talkie in like a corner of your room and like told you to do shit? And then like, you know, if you know that's somebody else, you're like, get out of here. But if you're thinking it's you, you're in trouble. You know, like, you're gonna have to figure that out. And you know, if you're crazy enough, if you're unhinged enough, you know, if like your psyche is beginning that delamination process where you actually enter into spirit communication and magic, you really need to have a firm understanding of what's going on. Doctrine of the microcosm and macrocosm, you have qliphothic forces in your subconscious. Yes, absolutely. You also have, you know, rectified, upright, you know, sephirotic elements that underlie you on a subconscious level. I mean, if you think about it, Yesod is the unconscious, you know, Yesod and to a degree, right? Yesod is fueled by the flux, the fire, the furnace of Netzach from, you know, the paths of Tzadi and Kof. And then on the other side, you have Hod, you know, and it's getting the influence from those paths, the rational conscious mind, but it's all being filtered through Yesod, and that's the subconscious, right? People want to declaw these things. They're real. They have objective existences. Now, the thing is that if it exists out there, it exists in here. If it exists in here, it exists out there. Solipsism is saying it only exists in here. Nothing else exists. Right? Materialism is saying it only exists out there. Nothing exists in here. Right? Solipsism, materialism. Those are the two plagues of postmodern thought. The extremes.
Yeah.
You are taking yourself out of this. You are the middle point. You are the center of that like toroidal field that constantly renews and transforms energy. That's you. And your consciousness is ultimately what determines how that energy, after coming through you, is conditioned and sent back out into the world. What kind of loops, what kind of patterns, what kind of geometry are you sending out there? But the from a historical context, the Qliphoth are so for this you have to go back to the Lurianic Kabbalah. I'm not going to give like a full history lesson. If you want to know the ins and outs of it in broad strokes, go to my channel, the Arcanum YouTube channel, with Ike Baker, and look at my my two very thorough videos on the introduction to the magical Kabbalah. I go through this from a historical perspective and theoretical. But in the Lurianic Kabbalah, that is the Kabbalah that was transformed and renewed through the Rabbi Isaac Luria, who was a mystic and a Kabbalist. He said that there was a first creation, and he the divine Shefa, the in and outpouring of the emanation of God, shattered the vessels that it had created or emanated in order to contain its essence. It was too much. The vessels were too weak and the stream was too powerful, so they shattered. So God, the monad, the absolute, Ein Sof, whatever you want to call it, gathers itself back up to the heights. But the shattered vessels are still in this world of materialism. And inside those vessels is trapped sparks of the Shekinah, the divine light. There's a second creation, and it works. It's essentially his whole model, if you need to conceptualize it mentally, is the tree of life, but it's concentric spheres. So like a Russian nesting doll. And which is what, right? The Ptolemaic model of the universe, the Platonic model of the universe. It's the same stuff. It's the same analogies, the same models. So the second creation is successful, and we're here now in Malkuth, and the Shekinah, the divine presence, is within us, but it's also in these shattered vessels, which we kind of share space with. Our material world rests upon that, kind of interpenetrates those vessels, the shards. And so these are the things that are ultimately symbols of the material inclination, which ever drives downward the spiritual aspirations of human consciousness. And we could go into a million different discussions about how things gain objective existence. What, is symbolism useful to a certain degree? To what degree is it useful? Are these things synonymous with demonic powers? But at the end of the day, like, you cannot, you absolutely 110%, I don't care what anybody says, you cannot approach magic from a psychologized perspective only. It's this and that. And I'll tell you why you can't do it. You're free to do whatever you want in your life, but if that's the way you're doing it, you ain't doing magic, period. Full stop. That's not magic. And your results will ultimately, you might be doing some amateur kind of like vigilante shadow work, but that's not magic.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, what would be the utility of working with that system? Would it be like to work, like you said, like work with your shadow aspects or whatnot? And because you mentioned like the driving downward aspect, and that kind of brings to my mind like almost a degradation or a degeneration sort of idea in my head. But then I wonder, is there like, in not analyzing these sort of things, is there like a neglect aspect to that where that could bubble up? Or yeah, I'm curious.
Well, the thing is, so here's the thing, right? In initiatic trajectories, the only way you are able to successfully handle these powers is by first coming into contact, full contact with that aspect of your spiritual architecture that transcends your personal ego. That is the only way. You have to establish that link, that you will not succumb, because you are half animal. Your body, your consciousness, your soul, right? In Greek, psyche meant your consciousness, your awareness, and they called that psyche, which we translate as soul. Okay, that becomes tinted, dyed by the experiences of the body, so that when the soul is released from the body, it is now imbued with, if you weren't prudent, this extreme desire, intemperance, anger, grief, with no way to process these, no ground for their satisfaction and their working out in a physical organism anymore. Okay, so you must establish the link between you and your higher divine genius, as it's called in the Golden Dawn. Now, some people say that's your holy guardian angel. A lot of Golden Dawn adepts don't agree. They think those are two different things. Okay, because they tell you different things. Okay, it's not just a given that your HGA is your higher divine genius. Okay, that's a Crowley thing. That's his kind of insertion. But and part of that was because when he was getting involved in the Golden Dawn and shit was hitting the fan, he was under Mathers's wing, and Mathers was trying like hell to get this Abramelin thing published, and it just wasn't happening. It was actually at the beginning of his whole Abramelin venture, the translation of the Abramelin, and then trying to get it published, that he started losing it. He started slipping. Everything kind of went downhill. You could pinpoint where in the Golden Dawn the first class in their trajectory where shit started to unravel, and it coincides with him taking on that project. So the HGA and the higher divine genius are not the same thing. HGA is closer to like the Fravashi of Zoroastrian cosmology. This like guardian angel that, when humans get sent into, the material realm, it's exactly that. It's an exteriorized entity that guides you and acts as a tutelary angelic force. Whereas your higher divine genius is the aspect of yourself, at least, and I'm talking about the Golden Dawn conception. Okay, I'm not talking about Thomas Taylor's Daimon Iamblichine theurgy. What we're talking about is the experience of the aspect of your own spiritual architecture. It is a part of you. It may present as if it's exterior, but it's actually what you really are, underlying your persona. Anyway, so it's always a part of, I would say, light occultism as opposed to dark occultism, for you to make this link before you begin commanding the qliphothic, demonic, etc. Now, early clergy that were working in it was literally creating the grimoire tradition. They said, I've been baptized in Christ. I've taken a holy office. I've made that connection. Christ is that connection for me. So they started playing around with demons and demonic forces. Now, to work with one, whether consciously or not, is to work with the other. So when you are doing depth psychology, hopefully with a qualified depth psychologist, and you're not just, telling yourself no to dominoes tonight and calling it shadow work. Okay. So shadow work is an actual psychological depth psychology, you need a Jungian to do that. Otherwise you're not doing it. Okay. So let's be very clear on that. But if you are doing stuff like that, in some shape or form, you're also summoning that exterior power to awareness in your life, awareness of you awareness of it. And so the thing is, you go in and you work with you summon forth these actual, lithotic, demonic, whatever you want to call them. And at the same time, they're awakening those things in you. Now, why the hell would you work with, the Klipot? Why would you work with a demon? Well, there's another concept that comes from Lurianic Kabbalah called the Tikkun.
If anyone out there is interested in purchasing any elixirs, spagyrics, alchemical formulations of any kind, do go and check out medicinebuddhalabs.com. And stay tuned, because Taylor's actually in the midst of producing a liquid supplement containing a spagyric tincture of ashwagandha and shilajit. The shilajit's lab-tested Siberian shilajit. It's going to be roughly 25 grams per bottle, and it'll be sold at basically 15 to 20% under what the market is currently charging for shilajit. So definitely stay tuned for that, and as always, enter PM Podcast at checkout for 10% off. Also, Potable Gold, Aram Potable. If you're looking for a solid source, Benjamin Terrell, the Temple of Mercury, is the man. He's my personal go-to, and I can attest to the quality. TheTempleOfMercury.com. PhiloCast at checkout for 15% off. Additionally, if you want an extensive variety of alchemical offerings, check out Euchaotiques.com. EAUXCHAOTIQUES.com. Go on there, check out the shop. There's tinctures, elixirs, essences, mushroom blends and extracts, crystal and mineral, metallics, ends tinctures, resins, all kinds of goodness. So do go check that out. If there's something you like, PhiloPod at checkout for 15% off of your order.
The fact that parts of the divine, the light of the divine Shekinah, are trapped in the shells means that it's almost like a bodhisattva kind of work. I now have that link, that quote unquote enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. Now I redescend. I've gone upward as far as I could go. It reached downward as far as it could come. We made that union, that contact. And now I work in its power, in its stead. I'm no longer in charge. It's in charge, but I am as its regent in the material fallen world, in the second creation. Okay? And so my job, because the whole conception, the model we were working with is, we don't cast the klipa away, because then we're not whole anymore. Mm. They have a piece of the divine Shekinah, the divine spark in them. Our efforts are to rectify, to convert evil to good, to transmute the base into gold, thereby rescuing the pieces of the divine light, the Shekinah trapped in the shattered vessels of the first creation, at the bottom, at the lowermost hell of reality. And in their doing so, completely spiritualize matter, reintegrate human to the divine, and finally put the brakes on this whole crazy train. So that's that is the magical worldview informed by Kabbalah, and that's why you would work. That's why you eventually do, if you get to a far enough stage, you end up working in most magical systems with that. But it should never be attempted until you have true contact with the higher. Otherwise, they will, over time, consume you.
Yeah, great, important points, I think. Okay, now, in terms of utilization of magic, or deploying or attempting to deploy these or any forces for harmful intentions, I guess this would maybe get into the morality aspect of operative occultism. and perhaps the
Could you report that? Can you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, I was thinking about in terms of the utilization of magic in regards to deploying or at least attempting to deploy any of these forces for harm or harmful purposes with an intention of harming somebody. And I think this will get us into maybe the realm of morality within operative occultism, and perhaps the consequential nature of these applications. I wanted to get your take on things along these lines.
Right. Well, right, I'm an initiate of the Hermetic Order, the Golden Dawn, and what a lot of people breeze by is the Hermetic. And to be a Hermetic is to be a natural philosopher to some degree, right? To read the book of nature, and to see the patterns that underlie all of reality, because there's not a lot of patterns. It's basically like one, maybe two formulas that really underlie everything in existence. And to be able to see those, to be able to immediately recognize those patterns, when and where they occur and what stage they're at, that is the ultimate aim of that brand of natural philosophy, because at that point you can utilize it to your own alchemical transmutation. And so one of the things that nature tells us, and I mean, you could even look at it from a modern physics standpoint, is that every action has an equal or and typically opposing reaction. Now, human consciousness is not great at consistently seeing the patterns. I don't think that's its natural disposition. Again, I think there's been a lot of training, a lot of dumbing us down, dissociating us from our true nature. But essentially, I'm not even going to get into this whole idea of what you do to another, you really do unto you, and all that stuff. To a degree, I believe that in a sense, but more so, it's the idea of cause and effect. You're gonna get back. It's karma. It's a cliche for a reason. You're going to get either smacked on the wrist, kicked in the ass, kicked in the teeth, depending on what you've done. And a lot of times the thing that's missing is that the act in and of itself is the punishment. I remember somebody telling me, somebody came into, when I was in school, somebody came up and was just like, they were real flustered. I'm like, what's the matter? And like, I was having a great morning. And I was online getting coffee, and this rude woman came in, and she was saying all these things and being really nasty. And she kind of like cut in front of me in the line, and then got into an argument with me, and I just totally lost it. And I'm like, yeah, but can you imagine, just for a second, pull back and for a minute, put yourself in that person's shoes, what type of person they have to be, what they must be feeling inside. Like a knot, in order to go around starting little fires everywhere they go. That in and of itself is a state of hell. It's like one of the circles right there. I've been there. So it's not some poor, some pious moralizing. It's the truth. The state of mind that these actions engender is the punishment themselves. And guess what? The punishment precedes the action. So you have to get these things under control so that you don't have regret, so that you don't have karma that's, bad karma that's coming. People like to say, call everything bad karma. Karma can be good too, and that's another thing. People think that they're just, well, I've not done anything bad, so why do bad things happen to me? Well, what have you done to engender the cause for good? What good causes have you done, right? Nature wants homeostasis, which is why cause and effect exists in the first place. It's a rectification to bring us back to nothing, to bring us back to zero-sum game. You know, so it's like, you want good, you got to do good. You know, like, so engender those causes. But that's really my take on that stuff. And you know, like, magic is powerful. You're engaging with powers that are like, they're forces of nature, but not only they're untapped and they're unrecognized forces of nature, they're unquantified as yet. We don't have a way to quantify them. This could be more powerful than a typhoon, more shattering than an earthquake, and you're toying with it, and you're getting sucked into the whirlpool of desire and negative emotion and obsession. Can you imagine what's happening to your soul? Can you imagine in what way you will be intincted when your soul continues on without a body, without any material grounds to satisfy its regrets, its pain, its anger? And this is why, specifically because the energies, when you call in energy in magic, when you call in spirit, it's going to amplify whatever's there, you know? So you need to rectify your sphere of sensation. We do that in the Golden Dawn by using these sort of astral, mental, etheric models projected onto our physical bodies and in our spheres of sensation, which are based off of the order of the tree of life. And that is something that goes quite a way to recentering, equilibrating, and balancing us as people to whatever extent that we can be balanced at that given time. Then you call the energy in, and it amplifies a more balanced human being over time. Whereas if you're pulling in spirit, etheric energy, you know, it's going to amplify all the negative shit, any blockages you have, you know, and those can become powder keg situations.
Beautifully said. Earlier you mentioned relinquishment to the highest, and there's, you know, the famous line, there is no religion higher than truth. And on that note, I want to ask you, what are, in your assessment, the pros and cons within like the history of the Theosophical Society, egregore specifically?
Well, I just, right out of the gate, I just want to let everybody know the first esoteric organization I ever belonged to was the Theosophical Society. I joined them in 2011. So I don't have anything against them per se, but I think Blavatsky was a great example of what spirit can accomplish when a strong personality retains its identity but serves the higher. She did a lot of good work, but like anything else here, we're talking about karma, we're talking about cause and effect. You know, the more good you put in, the more bad comes. You don't get a quantity of one without eventually receiving a quantity of the other. And you have this like feedback loop. So, you know, she, in my estimation, she was part of a global initiation. And a lot of people don't understand the impact that the Theosophical Society and the organizations that adjacent to it and inspired by it, and even that inspired it, people have no historical context of how massive all this stuff was. It is likely that if you lived in America or the UK or like Germany, you had a relative at some point that was involved with these things, or at least reading these books. We like to think of everybody as being these really, you know, common sense, no nonsense, salt of the earth, blue collar folk. And that's true, but that doesn't denote materialism. You know, a lot of people in the, you know, just the last 150 years, 200 years. I mean, these societies impacted, these micro societies, these esoteric orders, they impacted society at large to a level that is inestimable. You know, even Adolf Hitler came out of an esoteric society in Germany, the Thule Society. You know, esotericism is fucking everywhere. You know, presidents are Masons, and you know, there's people you'd never even realize a part of magical orders, initiatory orders. But that's the reality of it. You know, the Wizard of Oz was written by L. Frank Baum. He was a theosophist. You know, I mean, if you really go through and with a fine-tooth comb and look at the pages of history, I mean, most people believed in something, and a lot of people subscribed to these societies. They participated in them, or they consumed their literature and practiced their exercises. There were correspondence courses left and right, splinter orders every week. You know, Stella Matutina, Builders of the Adytum, Society of the Inner Light. I mean, what have you? It's just tons of splinter organization. Blavatsky, though, on the other hand, she was not fluffy about it. And part of that, she was very, very determined, very, very organized. You got to look at the time period too, right? So spiritualism was huge. Where did that really, if you had to say, where did it start? It started in upstate New York, I think in the 1840s, 1850s, with the Fox sisters. And as a product of, you know, you had this society, American society, torn apart by the Civil War. Husbands, brothers, fathers going out, dying, never coming home. People needed to grieve. They wanted to get in touch with their loved ones. They turned an eye towards the other side. And then you have all this like romantic era kind of Sleepy Hollow stuff. And you always wonder, like, why does it come from that like Tim Burton time? You know, like, why is everybody wearing petticoats and frock coats and nobody has any combed hair? You know, it's like, well, because like this is when spiritualism was huge. You know, like in America, that's when it was a cultural phenomenon. Table turning, seances, esoteric study groups, things like this. And in the midst of all that, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky shows up on the scene in New York City with William Quan Judge and Henry Steele Olcott, and just having these revelations, telling these stories of her travels in the Orient. And I mean, Isis Unveiled, the only way I got through that tome was by just her regaling you with these incredible stories, the most vivid imagery and poetic language. It means it's incredible. It's a feat to read her writing. And she had a very strong-willed, focused personality. No nonsense. She knew what she was talking about. I mean, 1860s, 1870s, to be talking about Plotinus, you know, it's mind-blowing. Talking about Iamblichus, theurgy. So then what happens? You get all this other interest generated. So they also had offices in London and in Adyar in India. Okay, so you've got the Theosophical Society in London, and they open up this Theosophical publishing house. They're churning out books. You know, mostly, I mean, it's the flagship is her. Blavatsky still, there is no theosophy without her at that point. And what she was really great at is getting people interested and putting people in charge. Okay, you're going to run this, you're going to run that, you're going to run this. And she just kind of made her rounds and focused on writing and getting in contact with her masters, her ascended masters, things like this. Now, that created pockets of discussion, study groups, as it were, discussion groups. And some of these featured guys like Sam Mathers, William Wynne Westcott, right? into the founders of the Golden Dawn, really into the Western esoteric traditions. Her brand of spirituality, of esotericism, focused on the Eastern esoteric traditions. But her constant affirmation is that they're all one, right? That's the whole point behind there is no religion higher than truth. It's one perennial stream, that we need to get back to the core of. And she introduced that for better or for worse. She introduced a lot of Eastern vernacular, a lot of that stuff, a lot of those ideas she introduced over here. And then that was at a time when also you had guys like Paramahansa Yogananda coming over from India. You had Alan Bennett going over and studying in the East the meditation, the meditative Vedic systems, and things like this, eventually culminating in guys like Aleister Crowley going over there. Kind of like these esoteric Silk Roads, but so a lot of connectivity, a lot of organization and discussion, pulling us right. Another thing that we suffered around that time, not too far, was the Industrial Revolution, which threatened, and it's been the constant threat to the present day. As Joseph Campbell said in his last interview with Bill Moyers regarding Star Wars, the whole point of this thing is the question: are you going to be a human? Are you going to let technology overcome? That whole thing of like Darth Vader being half machine, and then Luke losing his hand and he's now turning into an automaton based on his his inability to control his emotions, etc. So you had that permeating the public consciousness, and so these are ways of dealing with it and reaching upward, reaching outward, towards that other side, the side we were talking about before, the inner realms, and the subconscious. We don't know. There's no pinpoint where you can say, okay, this is where my subconscious ends and the collective unconscious begins. There's no way. It's kind of this room, and if something walks into it that is foreign there, and has this crazy objective presence, then okay, this is not me. But there's these permeable boundaries. There's these kind of mutable regions where they fade into each other. So we were investigating these things, and at the tip of the spear was the Theosophical Society and all the work they were doing. She believed in work, work. She poured her heart into this thing, and everybody that was around her put in an equal amount of work. And eventually what she ended up creating was something called the ES. Have you ever heard of the ES?
No.
So it was the esoteric section of Theosophy, and it was meant to be kept secret.
Is that the part Mead was the head of that, wasn't he?
He definitely had some part in it. I don't know who was the actual head, but I have basically a whole book of their of the collected writings of the original bylaws and articles of constitution.
Wow.
For it, and all sorts of cool stuff. It's available in the Blavatsky Collected Writings series from the Theosophical Publishing House. Another thing I'd recommend to Theosophists and people involved in the Golden Dawn is the Theosophical Glossary. Now, the thing is, people don't remember also, the Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled were massive. They shattered worlds of occultism, of burgeoning science. She was getting involved with atomic physics and stuff like that, it was just insane. Everybody had in these communities had read those books. They changed the way people talked about spiritual stuff. They changed the way they blended what we now have as inherited as quantum spirituality that comes from theosophical interpretations of Vedic scripture, which in itself was this proto spirit science. But the time was just right for all those things. She started the ES, the esoteric section. Mathers was in it. Westcott was in it. I believe at a certain point, Dion Fortune was involved in it. Um, uh, there were a couple of other, very, very noteworthy occultists who belonged to the esoteric section. Now, what happened was Blavatsky died in, I think, 1891. She appointed, I think, Annie Besant as her successor. But I think her and maybe Mead were kind of duking it out for who was going to be the head of the Theosophical Society. Anyway, or Alice Bailey was kind of like involved somehow. I'm not sure that I have the details exact, but I remember that there was this kind of fight, this
There's
power
like
struggle.
something Ledbetter or something like that. I think he was
Right. Well, see, that's the whole thing. That's where we really start taking a turn for the worse. Now, Leadbeater was extremely influential. He essentially started the liberal Catholic Church. The liturgies written by him, that whole independent sacramental movement came out of it, which is like huge today. That's when you see a bunch of dudes in bishops' hats on Facebooks, and you're like, what church does he work at? But the pictures of him in like a basement or at like somebody's barbecue. That's that's because that dude didn't have consecration in like a orthodox or mainstream and I'm not knocking it, right? I mean, I'm involved in that stuff too, but it's just, how are there so many bishops on Facebook when you're an occultist? And that's how. So but Leadbeater, he did extensive work on, like, he wrote about things like the chakras, and I'm pretty sure he penned Man Visible and Invisible. So he talked a lot about it. Essentially, Blavatsky's work in the Theosophical Society opened the floodgates for this kind of interpretation of again, science that was burgeoning at the time. Our understanding of atomism, which has become the prevailing paradigm, even though it's like wildly just untenable as a theory. And all these sorts of things. They were having open communication in those societies. Psychology, right? You could be a lay practitioner. You didn't need a degree to study to practice psychology, particularly in the UK, because it was so new, and so they were getting involved in that, and they synthesized all this stuff. I suspect that Jung was heavily. I suspect that he was heavily influenced by those writings, because they were everywhere at the time. Yeah. We downplay it nowadays, but I mean, it was everywhere. So that's when the cons really start to come, after Blavatsky's death. And you have, this is the tricky thing about Blavatsky, and it plagues us to the modern day. She claimed to receive her initiation at the hands of quote unquote ascended or hidden masters. And that's essentially this idea that, like, from the time of a young child, this Indian dude had been psychically communicating with her. And she saw him once at like a parade. Out of the blue, she recognized him, and he was like riding a horse, and he gave her the silence sign. And she continued her training through these ascended masters. And she talked about them. And she started talking about what an adept is. And that's when adept entered the spiritual vernacular, through her, really. Her and Bulwer Lytton, obviously, in Zanoni, which was written probably several decades before she was around. But she really put right. Zanoni was a work of fiction, and her stuff was being touted as, cutting edge, groundbreaking spiritual science. So her followers and the people who succeeded her, they all said, well, now I've contacted my own masters. So now they're going to tell me, and I'm going to tell you now which direction theosophy is going to go. And I'm also going to publish my own line of prestigious books here. You can, for $5.95, you can read all my books that were inspired by Kuthumi or Dwal Kul or whatever these people's names were, the ascended masters that nobody had ever seen, met, or heard of before. And then essentially that came down to us. It boiled down to the New Age. And the New Age for me is like, it's like a psyop. It's like COINTELPRO. It's a complete infiltration of something that could have been great. By telling us not to do anything. It's not worth it. We're all one. Everything's fine. Just let whatever shitty stuff is happening here happen, because you can't do anything anyway. You just need to, really focus on being quiet, inner and outer. Don't fucking say anything. Don't think anything. And we're all one. And just bring positivity to your small circle of idiots over there. Like that's the philosophy behind a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And what's even worse is that it popularized this idea that anybody can come into true and genuine contact with benevolent, adept, and tutelary divine forces. And that has engendered a whole different line of spiritual interpretation. It has created the various interpolations which are destroying the Western esoteric traditions, corroding them, washing them out, right? Because what did I say earlier, right? You can't kill the truth, but you can obscure our perception of it. You can destroy our ability to see it. There is truth in the Western esoteric traditions. It has been contributed to and refined and evolved over the course of millennia by what we can conceive universally to be the greatest minds to ever exist. Okay? The greatest minds to ever exist in the ancient world over the course of 2,000-3,000 years have, worked on these things, worked on these problems, systematized this stuff. Now we're throwing it all out the window. We're drowning it with the David Ickes of the world and with like it's the perfect example, like Drunvalo Melchizedek, the people who channeled the raw material. I mean, so much of these ideas of like star seed and twin flames, it just comes from New Age literature. Like, what if I came up with some idea of like, you also have a spiritual part of you that is a ladybug, and your job is to go out. But would you swallow that hook, line, and sinker too? I'm not understanding why people think it's all just whatever. If it sounds good, it's spiritual. When these things are literally destroying our West by just drowning them, just drowning them out with noise. And so that to me is a major con of the Theosophical Society. On the other hand, they created a very, very good spiritual vernacular, which was in use by the founders of the Golden Dawn, their splinter organizations like the Stella Matutina, the Alpha et Omega, and even for you funny people who are big fans of Crowley. You can barely understand Crowley if you don't understand Theosophical verbiage. I mean, he traveled to the East. These are the things that he discoursed in. So Theosophical glossary is great. I would tell you to read the Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled, but I don't think anyone has that kind of time on their hands anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's why I like to talk to you, because people can listen to this and get the really important points. The first
because I have had a tremendous amount of time on my hands over the
apparently
20 years.
The first 3 cool books that I came across that kind of got me going were from a used bookstore that I stumbled upon, and one was the Kybalion, and another one was The Law of Karman. It didn't say karma, it said Karman. And then the other one was just labeled Theosophy. And those were just really cool because at the time I hadn't ever, come across really any interesting stuff like that. And I think because you'd mentioned the burgeoning science aspect, and I like that. And I think if we think, I like the word a lot, like Theosophy. And if you look at the Trinity, I think the intention was to unite theology, philosophy, and science. Was that the kind of general idea?
Well, that was her idea. At the end of the day, theosophy as a term comes from the I want to say 16th or 15th century German mystic Jakob Böhme. He
Yeah.
was the one who first developed a system that he called theosophy. Um, which is knowledge of the divine, knowledge of God, right? Divine knowledge, Theo, God, Sophia, wisdom, theosophy. But yeah, I mean, that's what was going on in their milieu. They were trying to show that it was all one, right? Because when you go back and you look at, like, again, and this is another massive contributing factor, right? That British archaeological invasion of Egypt.
Mm.
They were digging shit up in the sand. Budge was publishing all these crazy rituals and his interpretations of Egyptian magic, which, yeah, we get it. We get the Stargate quote. It's not, nobody knows why they're still publishing his stuff, but there's some great shit in Budge. But it's likely because you heard that quote in a movie, you're not even going to take time to read it. When in reality, there's some really cool shit that he did, particularly as concerns Egyptian magic. And so all this stuff was in the public consciousness. I mean, can you imagine what it must have been like to live back then? Now, all this shit now we take for granted. You want to go on a date, you go to like the Met. You hear, oh look, there's a sarcophagus. Wow, it's cool, huh? Let's go to the cafeteria and get it. Like, these people found perfectly preserved bodies in tombs that sometimes had like millions of dollars worth of treasure in it. And then they would go and they would unwrap the mummy at like a party in somebody's like uptown New York apartment, which is insane to me, and then all these advances, Louis Pasteur's germ theory, like the whole world was changing. And these people were just kind of riding the wave. So you do kind of see all these things converging to this particular point in time where, like, there was kind of a moment of collective insanity, because nobody had their feet on the ground. I think we're coming to that in a different way. Now, I think we might even still be reeling from those effects. We might just be like the nth degree out from that cultural kind of just insanity of war, the first tycoons in America. Yeah. And I mean, even the invention of the tank for World War I and that kind of like industrial warfare was new. These people dealt with a lot, but it was, they were all trying to kind of go back in time. If you look at like the Egyptian priest class conception of everything, there was no difference between religion and science. It was all one thing, right? That's where we get the term, the etymological root of our word nature comes from the Egyptian word for gods, nature. So it's like it was all one thing for them. And so that's, yeah, absolutely. It's the rediscovery of that on a higher arc, hopefully for Blavatsky and her Theosophical Society. But ultimately, the powers that be know more about this shit than we do, in my estimation. And so we'll continually take, as the tides are moving, all the efforts go to subverting it. What could be good becomes inverted. It's just a constant, okay, we're going to take, and we're going to turn you upside down. So that's, that might be pessimistic, but I am a Gnostic after all.
Well, okay. On the note of like Blavatsky and her associations with Tibet and Tibetan occultism, have you heard of the term a tulpa or tulpamancy? I think it's like rooted in Tibetan origins. I guess some kind of like an autonomous being created by the mind or something like that, or what's up with tulpas?
I'm pretty sure that tulpas were what got converted to, in theosophical verbiage, thought forms. And Leadbeater and Besant co-wrote a book called Thought Forms. Very, very interesting. And you can actually be trained to see them in other people, which is really weird and fucking cool. But a tulpa, I think, was something that was generated to such a degree of focus, right? You needed to essentially have a CD. You needed to have the magical powers. to create a tulpa which was so strong that it took on its own autonomous life form, that it actually became autonomous. And that is kind of what can happen, right? When we're talking before, we're talking about creating the simulacrum of the self that you can transfer your consciousness into. Well, when I said that you have to kind of resist it in its urges to like move around, you're focusing for so long on this one specific thing that it's beginning to become a tulpa. It's beginning to become self-autonomous, and you have to like nip that in the bud.
And are these related to what are called servitors, or is that a different thing? Or
servitors, as I understand it, I'm not 100% sure. The vernacular is kind of, I think Dion Fortune talked about why they're bad in psychic self-defense, basically kind of sending out these like etheric manifestations to like do your bidding when you can't. Like you'd be asleep but you'd like send out an etheric wolf to go and like plague somebody or like haunt somebody. I'm not certain that that's exactly what a servitor is, but that's, for some reason, that's the first thing that comes to mind. But essentially you have this, and this is important. There is no part of you that does not come under the governance of your mind. It's just how much of your consciousness you are willing to account for moment to moment. Now, to take complete control of everything at once would destabilize you. You would doubtless collapse under the weight of that kind of awareness. You don't possess it. But as in all other forms of exercise, you can be made to control and contain these things. And so eventually we all need to, it's part of initiation, it's part of ascension, is to become fully aware of thoughts, of feelings, of each part of your energetic body. You have to command these things, otherwise they ultimately become impressed by exterior forces. And that's why it's so important in magic to remain on the active path and not become a medium. Nothing gets to come in and ride me. Nothing gets to come in and interact. The only thing is just my higher divine genius now gives the orders. And that's a process that takes years, sometimes decades of ritual theurgy. And it's unmistakable. Yeah. And the only path there is humility. That's the only path to there. There is no other path that takes you there. It's humility. But the main thing is that we can control not only our bodies and our speech and our thoughts, but we can control our physical energy. We can control our etheric energy, right? Which corresponds Kabbalistically to the nefesh, which corresponds in things like Chinese medicine to the qi, which corresponds to the prana of the certain types of prana in Vedic medicine and things like that, and energy theory. That stuff can be controlled. And one of the reasons why sometimes we can't, like addiction and stuff like that, sometimes it's that part of our energetic being that is the missing link. This energy kind of, it's affected by things like elemental tides, Tatvic tides, planetary hours, things like this. It's affected by the moon cycles. And when we haven't made that alchemical marriage of conscious mind to passive receptive etheric body, it becomes impressed and then affects us on an emotional level. And then we act impulsively and in ways that are like, this must be temporary insanity because I cannot stop myself. So it's very, very much important. This is the subject of the book that I'm writing.
Oh, I was gonna save that for last one to give people a teaser if you were gonna be available too.
Yeah.
But I got maybe one more question if you have time. It's kind of a big one. Okay, so like within
Sky, there are no small questions with you, buddy. I love
it. So in terms of like members of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuit order, I don't know if you have an opinion on this or not, there are many out there these days. They feel as if the Jesuit order has become a sort of almost mind control type egregore, at least largely a corrupted one. And it's a big topic in some circles that I dance with, and a big topic of discussion. I've interviewed some different guests. For example, one guy, Andreas Exertus, he's like one of the smartest, coolest dudes I know, and he was raised by a Jesuit, and he's talked about how he believes they have some of the most advanced spiritual practices and things along these lines, for better or worse. And I think in terms of spiritual knowledge sets, there's a pretty advanced aspect, and of course people are people, and so it's not always black and white in terms of intentionality and how susceptible one may be due to powerful influences that they find themselves confronted with. And I've also interviewed a former Jesuit, Douglas Gabriel, who himself, at least during his association, became extremely disheartened with it all, and to put it mildly. So I'll kind of leave it at that and just ask you, because you're one of the more advanced in terms of spiritual engagement with different traditions and whatnot. So maybe you would have an interesting input within this. Like, what do you make of it, for one, like the Jesuit order, and two, the notion of the concern of corruption associated with it?
I kind of view the Jesuits as, well, first of all, if I were prudent, I would say I don't know enough to comment. But that doesn't really make for good listening. So I'm going to go out on a limb, and the Jesuits are much more of they're a little bit more of an impenetrable society. There's no faking. There's no Jesuit cosplay. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can go and get bonked on the head and given robes, and tomorrow I can tell people I'm a priest and wave my letters patent. Like, you cannot do that with the Jesuits. So you need to buy in wholesale, lock, stock, and barrel. And I believe it or not, for a while I contemplated it. I know that missionary work is huge and education is huge. Some of the first educational institutions in the modern sense came out of Jesuit training. It was Jesuits who created the Latin standard, or the textbook for speaking and teaching, learning Latin in classical liberal arts academies. In the 1700s, 1800s, it's still in use in some academies that go the classical route. The Jesuit schooling, and their texts and their sources. Obviously they were formed by Saint Ignatius of Loyola, and he had his very famous spiritual exercises, which delivered him which enabled him to discover the occult forces of consciousness and the ostensibly exterior universe. And one of the things that he's famous for saying was, first of all, it wasn't his. I think he discovered these things, right? He was a traveler, but like that, I think even Marcus Aurelius put it in his Meditations, where it's like the day's review. Like, before you go to sleep, sit and remember your day kind of backwards, and things you could have changed.
Rickshaw, right. I think it's called, or something like that. Rickshaw. Yeah, Douglas told me about that.
Yeah, that's a Jesuit technique that, I mean, is practiced in magical societies. I'm not 100% sure, because I only read it. I didn't do it because I feel like if you've done the Golden Dawn Outer Order, you don't need to. But I'm pretty sure that Israel Regardie might have put that in his 1-year manual. But anyway, powerful exercise, and it's good. It that's one of those ways that you're expanding your consciousness. To kind of be self-critical. and review in minute detail and travel in your mind to places that don't exist here anymore, right? Because that's what the past is. And my recollection of the past involves some kind of synesthesia that stimulates my consciousness, my psyche in certain patterns and relationships. And my recall might be faulty, and you're learning things just by doing things as simple as that. So they were involved in mind training and consciousness expansion. And these were the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola, but also involved heavily prayer, devotion to Christ, as they understood that ideal in that particular milieu and under the auspices of the Catholic Church. Another thing that he said, which he's famous for saying, or I don't think I actually got to it yet. I started, but I didn't say. He said, "Give me the boy to age 7, and I will give you the man." Something like that. I think I destroyed that, but I paraphrase it. Basically, he's saying he had an acknowledgement of child behavioral psychology and development at that early point. He basically said, if you give me a boy up to the age of 7, I can train him to be exactly this person. He will not deviate from these ideals. And that can go either way, right? Are you doing good things with that? Are you doing bad things with that? And to me, it all comes down to, by their fruits shall you know them. Now, the Jesuits operate under the special purview of the Catholic Church, right? They're almost like this kind of intellectual missionary version of the Knights Templar. And some modern thinkers, authors, writers, people kind of conceptualize them as having gone rogue, similar to the way the CIA really runs the government now. Like people say, well, the church is just run by the Jesuits and it's all part of one cabal. That I don't know. I cannot attest to that clearly. But I will say that when you reach the level of power that the Catholic Church has achieved and maintains, I think everything I know about history, the aspect of human nature which corresponds to our animal selves, and just, the overall gut feeling I get is not a good one. It's not a good one. I think that I'm not going to speculate too much, but I can tell you with a fair amount of certainty that they don't have anything to do with, at least as far as I am aware, occult traditions and like the Golden Dawn and things like that. Nothing to do. If anything, I would assume like the CIA had more to do with that shit than the Jesuits do. Because what are the Jesuits going to do with a bunch of like pagans, prancing around in robes, taking on these monikers of Celtic gods and things like that? It's in a field. There's nothing. There's no power dynamic to be had there. It's kind of useless. But I've heard some people talk about the Jesuits and Masonry, and this gets into some whole, it just gets into a bunch of hairiness, because like, it's really hard. Masonry is an institution. It is monolithic. It's huge. It's everywhere. It's in like every city in America, almost, it's all over the world. It's international. Now, some of these Masonic bodies interrelate with each other, and some of them have nothing the fuck to do with one another. There's no recognition. There's no concordance. It just is what it is. You're there. We're over here. In the United States, it's so decentralized that the individual Masonic lodges are only beholden to the Grand Lodge of that state. So there's no one like overarching governing body, so to speak. And that's what people don't understand, is that like we're not all working in concert together. Yes, there may be, it would be the height of naivety for me to say that I know conclusively nothing shady goes on at the highest level. You can't say that about anything. I can't say that about my grocery store. Like you just, but the thing is, like, most of masonry is men getting together to support and educate each other. Because there's some things in this life that you can only learn from members of the same sex. There are some things you can only learn from members of the opposite sex, right? But you're not going to go to a dude to learn about your period, and we have things like that too. Rites of passage and dealing with testosterone. That's a hormone too. We don't get a pass for it though, do we? But it's you learn how to cope with these things by the affirmation of your elders that have been through it. And it's that and doing charity. I mean, and other than that, like we're walking around with sticks and aprons, staffs and aprons. It's a good thing. So whether or not the CIA or the Jesuits are involved with masonry at the highest levels, like I'm sure it's all one big fucking party. Once you hit some floor, in the elevator, guys like me and you will never be able to get up there. And that's it. But I'm not going to really speculate in terms of the Jesuits, but I mean, what do you think? What do you think is behind all of the, whether they're right or they're wrong, what do you think is behind this cultural paranoia right now?
Well, I think one, like you said, it's maintained a gigantic amount of power historically, and to some degree still modern day. But I think, when we're in the age of the internet and access to information, and it allows everything to be highlighted within all of these institutions, corruption at every level within every institution, whether that's the police department, whether that's religious orders. And like I always say, there's good apples and bad apples in almost every institution that you can come across. And there are going to be people that get together. There are going to be people that infiltrate all sorts of things to for whatever purposes they have. And I don't know. I can't, I'm not, I can only know my conversations with people that are close to these sort of institutions or individuals, or my direct conversations with people who have been, and listen to their experiences and just kind of add it to the grain of salt. Take it with a grain of salt, add it to the jar of considerations, and kind of leave it at that. And I do, I do enjoy entertaining a lot of these things, because there are so many instances where I think there's a healthy and an unhealthy aspect of paranoia. Maybe not paranoia, but just evaluation, or trying to decipher the truth of anything. That's what we're interested in, is trying to find the truth of whatever it is and what's really going on in reality. And maybe a lot of it is due to you're speaking to addictions, and I think there's also an addiction to paranoia, I think, or an addiction to being attracted to things that are out to get you, or things along these lines, which can be healthy to a degree, because we have this built-in instinct to be aware of danger or dangerous things or harmful things. So it's good to a degree, but then when you focus on something too much, it's almost like you're feeding it, and you're feeding your attention to it, and it's almost amplifying it. So it's just fascinating, because nowadays with the internet, we have the ability, everybody has the ability to share and disseminate information, formulate ideas and thoughts, build their own egregores and perpetuate them. And some of them just get amplified because a lot of individuals are super uneducated, and especially the realms that, these things that we're talking about. And So when something gets broken open in someone's mind where they learn about things like the CIA's nefarious involvements in whatever, X, Y, or Z, or the groups of police officers being doing shady things, they latch on to these ideas and then it opens up their mind to everything. And so it's I think it could be like a shock, like a cultural shock, and that might be what's going on largely, which I do feel like has some good in it because it's allowing people just to be allowing these conversations to happen and all over in different ways and people sharing their perspectives and their information. And I think it's just the state of like and all of this, the chaos going on. We're in the midst of it, and we're in the midst of this huge, like massive societal consciousness wave in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, I don't know. For me, I love to listen to everything, get everybody's perspectives, and just talk about it, and try to be as fair and honest as I can be, and get information that I can if it's useful for somebody, because I don't ever want to be a person that states something with certainty when I'm not personally certain, or accuse somebody of something when I don't have the information or the ability. I can speculate and I can be honest with my speculation, honest with my assessment of things, and I can be honest about the fact that I think it's very possible that these things are going on, and I think a lot of them have been proven, within the Catholic Church. Obviously, there's so much historical data that we could look at, but I feel like there are probably good individuals within these orders, and I feel like there's probably some sort of conflict between them. There's probably individuals in there that maybe want to do things differently. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's like politics within America and the government right now. I mean, for me, it's like, man, anybody that gets into politics, it's like good luck, because it's like a machine that's, for me, it seems like a machine that's breaking down, and for anybody that gets into it and tries to fix it is just going to get chewed up and spit out, unless you got a lot of stuff going behind you. But yeah, I don't know, it's a very complex and interesting topic and thing, and I like to draw attention to it because it's interesting, and I try to look at and hope for the good in things. But yeah, I don't know.
I think that's the best way. That's the best way to go, right? I mean, it all depends on, what we're talking about, like, what kind of good we're talking about. And I know
Yeah.
you, I think, well enough to know that you're not talking about like this pious moralizing or kind of whitewashing, material existence so that it's infinite daylight, you know, but balance, equilibrium, I think, that creates an environment that is sustainable for us to work and grow, towards the light rather than setting the whole building on fire. And I mean, because that's the whole thing. Like, even if you're trying to do good, right? What is it? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Like, you could still have a catastrophic end result, typically by by being self-righteous to the point where you think that, your vision or your small community's vision of good is the only right way. But it's pretty interesting to me. One of the things, to be 100% honest with you, I always knew that I would end up in esoteric orders, even though I didn't know what they were. Because my thing is that if I don't know anything about something and I want to know, I go do it. That's just the way I am. If I want to have the answers, I'm just gonna do it. So
Yeah.
if I want to learn how to build a fence, I'm gonna go become a carpenter for a couple of years. It's just what it is. So there's no better way, because then, like you said, all you can do is speculate with an air of confidence.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
we sorry, good.
no, I mean, from a certain perspective, some people might sit and listen to me tonight and say that's exactly what that dude's doing.
Yeah.
But I've you have to put the work in, and you have to learn from somebody, I think, in everything. You have to have some kind of tradition that you operate within, because that's the only thing that's going to teach you. You can't learn otherwise.
Yeah. And I think it's so easy to jump to any association with individuals and the groups that they're associated with. I mean, you could say, I Skylar interviews this member of this order, and this order is associated with this other order, and that order has this guy in it, and that guy uh is friends with this guy, and that guy who he's friends with killed somebody or something along these lines, therefore connecting all the way down. And a lot of people will string these dots together. Sometimes there's very compelling consistencies and patterns within a lot of the way that people go about it. Other times it's a stretch, and you can just literally pick it apart with anybody. It's like saying America, there are murders in America, and Ike, you live in America, so maybe you're a murderer or something along that. Like, it's almost can get to that level of assumption sometimes. And I feel like if you're gonna be somebody investigating anything in those realms, do your homework very thoroughly and have your information all laid out very clearly and comprehensive to make your points, because otherwise it can get people who are out there trying to live their lives and have good intentions and good people, quote unquote good people, it could get them, it could get an image or it could place an image on somebody that is false. And I don't want to be that kind of person that does that, and I don't think other people want to. And I think it could be easy to, and I don't know.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about what we were talking about before with cause and effect and karma, if you're imposing that kind of falsity, that derived assumption on people, what do you think is going to happen to you?
Right.
That same thing is good. You're going to suffer because you've done that. And a lot of times people just want to, scapegoating has been a thing for, since as long as humans have been around, there's been scapegoats. And one of the reasons for that is because people in groups, when an egregore is formed, I like to think of it as, this is pessimistic, I'm sorry, but I like to think of it as kind of like this dopey tulpa is formed. That's like kind of half awake, half conscious, this egregore thought form that, but not, I don't mean like that goes home with you. It's just when people are kind of together, when they're a mass, right? The mob mentality.
Yeah.
They don't want to be, they want to feign this indignation and play this part of like, blamelessness, which I guess what you would call today victimization. They want to play the victim. So, but the truth is that transcending, right? Coming full circle to what we're talking about in the very beginning, transcending the duality of, right and wrong behavior there is accepting both as equally true. It's not being one or the other. It's not, saying that nothing exists. nothing is true. It's like, no, both are true. How is that so difficult? Why is that so difficult? What has happened to our brain, our psyche, that we can't process the fact that the ancient Egyptians called, they had a conception for the underworld, the substratum of the universe, and you got there by going into the duat, the womb of Nut, and you'd get there and your heart would be weighed in the halls of Maiti, which basically means the halls of two truths, dual truths. And there's this mistake that a lot of people make when they think about unity. They think about something being completely neutral, being neither. It's really interesting in the Chinese or Taoist, the Chinese medicine philosophy of the Wu Wei, right? The Wu Wei means like nothing, and it precedes the yin and the yang. But in reality, it's androgynous. It contains both of them within it. So from the beginning, from the source, from a philosophical or a spiritual level, everything is true all the time. Like that's just kind of what it is. Like, people, and the truth about right and wrong is just that at the end of the day, everything that we do, whether it's a political, party or a system or institution, or whether it's a fucking rock band, it will produce things that are imbued with our highest capabilities and our lowest lows. Okay. And both of those things probably to some equal proportion will manifest themselves through us, because we are, as sages, philosophers, and priests, priestesses for eons have noticed, our physical bodies are a product of animal evolution, and our consciousnesses are a product of the divine presence. Mm. And these two things pull at each other constantly. And that's what it means to be a human.
Yeah. All right. Let's give a little teaser for your book coming out in closing for people. What you got? What you got on deck?
Well, right now I've got a lot of tentative titles, so I don't know that I can release. I don't know if I can sort of let the cat out of the bag fully on the titles, but I can definitely tell you guys what I'm working on. So essentially, I'm working on a book for Tria Prima Press, which will basically be a collection of essays that are related to the Western esoteric traditions, what they are not, why that matters. And I'll be taking the usual tack of history theory, and there'll be kind of a practical exposition from somebody who has insights into these techniques, because I have used and trained in all and made use of all of them. There isn't a single thing I'm going to talk about that I haven't done practically after at least several years of study in one form or another. That's going to be really cool, because it's going to really focus on the magical worldview, and how it all ties back to that, and how really right now, especially, but really at any point, worldview is ultimately of utmost importance in helping us make sense of everything, but also contextualizing the things that we say, the streams, egregores, lineages, traditions that we claim to work in, and why we should, why traditions are important, how they can be of use, but also at the same time how we can keep them living. A second one is, this is the first time I'll mention this in public, and I'm a little nervous, but I hope it's a good book, because I would love for the final draft to be accepted. But as it stands right now, I'm working on a book for Llewellyn Worldwide, which is great because they're a big publisher with lots of influence, and believe it or not, a lot of, some of my favorite writers are Llewellyn authors, Eva Dominguez, John Michael Greer, D.O.T. and Mantinia. Like these are people I know and I deeply respect. And I think it's great that Llewellyn is kind of taking this, making an investment in new authors and things like that. And I'm just hoping to be able to contribute my particular viewpoint to that discussion, which, I think is not going to be necessarily typical for that specific community, but I think it will be welcome. So far, everything I've done has been. So that book is going to concentrate on the energetics of Western magic, particularly in the Western milieu. It's very, very well fleshed out in Eastern systems, and that is not the case in the Western systems. Now, you can sort of graft, or interpolate or paste Western words on like Eastern practices. And to some degree, I have to use those practices as scaffolding because I have the good fortune to be thoroughly trained in both systems. But my attempt is to be able to tie the two systems in together and, hopefully to reveal how they actually are two expressions of the same current, the same thing that exists and that we make use of. And then also this book in particular will have a strong practical component. So it'll have exercises for development of etheric sight, for being able to tactilely sense and to see and work with what we were talking about earlier, the etheric body, and then exercises to be able to develop that, and then also I guess a la carte types of ritual components, so you can either participate with this at a level of the system that I give you in the book for personal development, health, and really health and magic, even theurgy, or you can kind of just use it wherever you feel. Oh, I like this particular thing, I'll do that. So, and yeah, I don't know how much you have put out there, but I'm hoping to be coming up with my first sort of microcosmic version of all that stuff for the class I'm going to be offering with and through you for your next venture, which is very exciting.
Yes, and I guess I'll go ahead and describe people a little bit about what that is that I've got going on. I'm working on a sort of esoteric mystery school, if you will, an online academia of esoterica. It's going to consist of a variety of different sort of courses, lectures offered by a bunch of different people that I've podcasted with on here, a bunch of different practitioners. It'll be encompassing the worlds of magic, astrology, alchemy, and all of that good stuff. I don't want to put the name out there yet. I want to leave that a mystery for now until I get everything fleshed out, but I'm very excited about it and hope everybody will be excited about that as well. So more to come with that. But man, another incredible episode this has been. So thank you. Greatly appreciate your time as always. And till next time, brother. Right.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure, man. I'm excited and grateful that you've included me in as many of your ventures as you have. As always, I have a very deep respect for you, and I'm looking forward to this next class thing. It's gonna be fun.
Yes, vice versa. All right. Talk to you later, brother.